Now recording. So, it's nice to see the less than half of you that should be here. How's everything going? Good?
Good.
Mostly good.
Mostly good. You know what, I can deal with mostly good. Mostly good is better than many alternatives. Any midterms this week?
Next week.
That's what we have in mind then.
Well, that makes this a good week, right? Yeah. So, before we get much into the actual material today, I would like very much to go over assignment 4. Assignment 4. Due date for assignment 4 is March 23rd, which is next Sunday. So you'll have about a week to work on it. So, let's take a look. If you haven't started working on it already, but you know, probably too much to ask. So, assignment 4, you're going to take all of this SVG stuff that we've been doing. You are going to write some kind of interactive graphic application. This can be a video game. This can be something that nobody would recognize as being a video game. You know? Although video games are sometimes things nobody would recognize as being a video game. See the entire subgenre of walking simulators. But I would be very impressed if I saw anybody doing anything in a three-dimensional environment here. So, goals of this assignment are, number 1, creating a web application using SVG and JavaScript, JavaScript event handling, DOM manipulation, using proper mechanisms now, and practicing using variables, because I'm sure, hopefully at this point everybody knows what a variable is and how to use it. Really? I really hope that. I strongly hope everybody knows what variables are. So, if something is not specified, you have the flexibility to be creative. If you are uncertain, please contact the professor. Please note that there are many solutions on the internet that might work as starter code for this assignment. However, you are required to write all code yourself from your own ingenuity. Everything is to come from your brain. There is nothing more obvious on this assignment than somebody who has given me the umpteen gazillion Flappy Bird clone that I've seen. Right? If you use an internet tutorial to create your video game, I will see it, I will understand what is going on, so we'll turn it in, and you will get a big fat plagiarism charge. Yes, I'm not messing about with this one. Watching a YouTube video and then typing out all of the code in the YouTube video, even if you are making your own minor modifications, what you consider to be major modifications, I will probably consider to be minor modifications, right? If you do that, you and about 20 or 30 other people who've put their code up on GitHub will have done the same thing, and you will get a good old honest internet plagiarism strike. It's still plagiarism if you type every character by hand, right? Manual copy-paste is as bad as copy-paste. Okay? Sound good? I know I'm mostly preaching to the choir here because you're the people who actually come to class, but you know. So it goes. If you are unsure if something would constitute a violation of the academic integrity policy. Again, please contact yours truly. So, those of you who may or may not know anything about the development of video games may know that video games are a notoriously difficult thing to develop. They are long and take a lot of time and effort. And developing one in the amount of time that you have remaining to submit this assignment is, let's just say, even the most crappy Atari games took longer to develop than that. Although they were also working in assembly code, but you know, so it goes. So, when you are developing your video game, please read the scope and the requirements given in the document, because there won't be, well, although there aren't like technically points for like doing an absolutely beautiful implementation of Pac-Man or something like that, if I see an implementation of Pac-Man or something sufficiently complicated, I'm going to, like, you know, it'll put me in a good mood. And you want me in a good mood when I'm grading your papers, right? So you can minimally meet the requirements of this assignment fairly easily, right? So, in this assignment, you are being asked to create a simple graphical application or a game. Since we have no back-end support, this will be 100% on the client. Of course it is, this is client-side programming. Jeez. High scores, etc. will reset every new page load, so you're not expected to keep any persistent data. Do not overcomplicate the program itself. It can be as simple as a heads or tails coin flipping game, a dice game, memory matching game, a typing tutorial, HTML tutorial, or some other simple game that you may wish to create. Perhaps there's even a Java assignment that you may wish to use to your purposes. I don't know, something about a vending machine, you know? There are requirements though, right? I personally don't really recommend doing the vending machine, because like, you know, it's not really very gamey, you know? But anyway. So, the goal here is to practice programming, not to create a AAA multi-million-dollar hit game, which you would definitely, if you could produce that in 1 week in JavaScript and SVG, then you should probably stop going to school, because you're done. You can go and work. You don't need to be here anymore. The artistic standard is good enough, not gallery ready. A demo video is available. So this YouTube link is it's a video of Steve Adams going through a bunch of submissions he's gotten in the past, which he's liked. It's kind of like his rogues gallery of nice projects that he's received in the past, to sort of give you an idea of the scope of the sorts of things he's talking about when he put this together. So this would be, let's take a look. Let's control click. There we go. Oh look, he's got ads on his videos. Skip. There he is, in all his glory. I've got 10 times the subscribers he does. Just saying. So, this is a thing that was actually submitted by a student. It's a robot jumping sheep. This is like, probably about like the maximum degree of like looking nice that I would expect. In fact, I would not expect this. This actually kind of takes me back a little bit to the early days of games that were like done inside of Java applets inside of web browsers, and like they'd often like put these kind of like, oh look, it's a picture of like a Game Boy or something, around it. But yeah, okay, Steve, that's enough. Silence. Here's another one for you. It's a jumping and ducking game. You can see it's kind of got the whole geometry dash kind of thing going on. But it's basically just like, again, another runner game, right? And that's it. It's not actually a requirement that like the level have any form of random generation, but one of the things that you may find is true, especially of a game like this, it's actually easier to lay out a random number generator to generate the level for you than to actually design a level. Like if you're designing a level of like 30 or 40 of these obstacles, you have to like in your brain pick like 30 or 40 numbers and like worry about them and stuff. Oh look, here's another runner game. You don't have to do a runner game, by the way. Right? Yeah. Oh, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, level design. It's easier to just like, math.random times 2 floor. That's easier as a way to generate levels than this. Oh look! Floppy square. Yeah. So I should say, one of my students in one of the other classes got just a little bit narky when I said, don't use any of the code I give you in class or post to the announcements feed in your game. And because if you notice, like on Tuesday I put like 3 things up that were all like, that's actually a kind of stripped down implementation of Space Invaders, that one. That course was, that section's a little bit ahead, so I had time to kind of waste doing a somewhat larger example with them. So like we're all kind of caught up now. But essentially, I said like don't use my code, and he's like, oh, but I wanted to do Space Invaders. Sure you did, but assuming that you did. Okay, so do Space Invaders, just don't use my code. If like I am a professor, I have a coding style, I do things in a particular way, right? There's way more ways to implement Space Invaders than the single way that I decided to do it, right? So like, when we say, be original, like there's 100 students in the class, I'm likely going to get more than one runner submission, right? Or I guess this is like a lane dodgy game or something. But like, just do your own work and you won't get hit for plagiarism, right? Don't share code, don't share your code, don't take code from other sources, just do it yourself and everything will be fine. Even if your game ends up looking fairly similar to someone else's, like there are programs that are so simple that like there's really only 1 or 2 ways of doing them. A lot of the JavaScript assignment 2 things are kind of in that ballpark, right? Like if you think particularly of like the range question, right? It's like there are only so many ways you can do an if statement, right? Ooh, Tetris. Tetris World! This used to be the 5th assignment, apparently. Yeah, like, for something this, oh look, something political, great. Wow, this was even, I think that's a thing about a certain Russian leader consuming feces, shall we say. Great. It's nice to know that this was a thing even back in 2022, which I think was before the war started. So it's nice to know he's been that popular for a while, right? Am I right about that? Is that before the war started? I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. This looks like basketball to me. Yeah, shoot the basket game. Very good. So, what was I saying? Yeah, don't cheat, basically. Once you get to a certain level of complexity of program, the kind of the same principle that makes your essays completely unique to you also applies to programs, right? Like with an essay, how many possible sentences are there in the English language, right? Considering the existence of the semicolon, like literally an infinite number, right? So, like the particular ways in which you, oh, this is another ad, very good. Get out of here, ads. So the particular way in which you formulate your own code will have your own fingerprint on it, right? The diction that you select when you comment things, small choices about the logic that you implement, right? The manner in which you put spaces between things, that's also fingerprints your work, right? You know, are you a person who puts the curly brace on the same line with the if statement, or do you enter it on the next line? There are 10,000 little different individual things that you do when you're programming that nobody else does that specific combination of things. So that's if you have that reproduced, it's a pretty good indication of plagiarism. And if you want to know the God's honest truth, the Infernal chatbot also has its own style of programming, and I can tell. I'm not an idiot, and I can tell. So, specific game requirements then, or program requirements. Your program must meaningfully make use of SVG elements. Another thing that if you're, another warning about online tutorials is that if you're not careful in selecting them, I've seen people put together games using like divs, like just divs, instead of using SVG. But it's like Flappy Bird in divs, right? Not even fulfilling the assignment requirements. That's another thing that you have to be careful of when you're taking a look at these online tutorials, which you shouldn't be, is that very often they won't even meet the requirements that are set out in the assignment document. These elements must be interactive using at least 2 types of JavaScript mouse events, or optionally, 1 mouse event and 1 keyboard event. If you really want, like if it's like your vision, and you want to do 2 different types of keyboard events, I'm actually okay with that. So basically you have to do 2 different types of events, some combination of mouse and keyboard, okay? If you want a code example for doing a keyboard event, take a look at the Space Invaders code that's been posted. And like, on that subject as well, when I say don't use my code to do the assignment, I'm not saying don't look at my code for like instruction on how to do stuff, right? The code is there as instruction material, right? Just don't like give me a version of my Space Invaders game with the colors changed, right? Doesn't constitute meaningful change. So your game must add SVG elements and remove SVG elements. You must have creation and destruction exercised in this game somehow. That's a requirement. Yes. You may have an initial layout of hard-coded elements if desired, but all other adding and removing of elements must be dynamic using JavaScript. So, for example, in the runner game, what I'm looking for is those fences to be generated in JavaScript. I don't want you to just like define 100 of them that are like most of them are off page and you just kind of translate them in. That's not what we're going for, right? We want dynamic, creation, and destruction. Style your SVG elements using CSS in addition to the basic XML parameters available. Animate at least one SVG element using JavaScript. The animation must be obvious and noticeable. Do not use JavaScript to add a CSS animation to an element, and do not use animated GIFs to fulfill this request. So, did I show you guys the video of the zoetrope in this class? This is a video I've been showing these classes to explain animation. Okay, let me show you. Let me show you. One of these things. That is not even. That's just me.
That's an ad.
Good grief. So, basically, the concept of animation is that you show a series of images with very slight differences sufficiently quickly that it gives the illusion of movement, right? Don't chorus, get to the chorus. There we go. So if you take a look, this is this is a very old, like 19th century version of a zoetrope. So you can see, like, the horse appears to be galloping, right? And if you spin this, it's because there's slots cut in the drum which only permit a view at fixed intervals. It reproduces the idea of producing frames, right? So, in a modern video game context, we would think of these as being frames, right? So, if you run these frames together sufficiently quickly, it gives the illusion of movement. That is what animation is, right? So, when you're reproducing animation inside of JavaScript and SVG graphics, you are going to need something that modifies some property of something in a sequence at fixed time intervals. The fact that I just said at fixed time intervals should indicate that you need to use which function to set that up? Set interval, yes, very good. So you want set interval modifying some property of something over time. That's animation, right? Now, what that property is, it can be a lot of things, right? The kind of classic one is just simple translation, right? Have something move on the screen, that's animation. You can also have the sort of object stretch and scale, that constitutes animation. You could have an object changing color, that also constitutes animation, right? You could have any combination of all of these things, that's animation. Does that make sense? The Space Invaders example, the code being up on the announcements feed, kind of takes this to an extreme. The code there is designed so that all of the things appearing on the screen have corresponding objects, which the JavaScript keeps track of. Every frame, the screen is completely cleared, all objects are deleted, the whole thing, and then the next frame is created like completely from all of the objects that exist in JavaScript. And by doing that, at a certain point, if you've got enough going on, it's actually easier to do it that way. But as opposed to having a set interval set up for every individual element, right? It makes sense to just do one function for everything. Not to mention that solves the problem of like synchronizing frames, right? Like at 60 frames per second, you probably wouldn't notice, but like you don't, if you were to slow it down, you don't want like your alien to come down one tick and then your bullet to come up one tick and your alien to come down and your bullet to go up. Like you want them to both move at the same time. You don't want to split your frames, right? So if you collect everything into one instance of set interval, everything will be collected into one frame transition, so it'll look better. Not that it really matters here, an acceptable solution would include frames being split like that, but we always strive for excellence. We are not content with mediocrity. So I want excellent frame transitions and not mediocre frame transitions. But if I get mediocre frame transitions, you'll still pass the assignment. So another important requirement, this assignment requires that you have some HTML input element that modifies the game in some substantial way. So this input element will exist like to the side or off, it's outside of the SVG, right? Something like modify the colors of certain objects in the game according to the input. Another easy one to implement is change the frame speed to increase or decrease the speed of the application. Speed of the application is very often just difficulty. Like it maps very cleanly onto difficulty in a video game, just how fast it's running, sort of irrespective of other factors. And the poor man's way of doing that is to just modify the frame rate. So yeah, does that make sense? Need something to modify something in the game that is pertinent. Track state in some meaningful way. So tracking state does not have to be very difficult. Basically, you need to keep one or more variables which do one or, keep track of something that's going on in the game. Maybe the number of lives you have left if it's a game where you can lose. Maybe it's the number of fences you've jumped or balloons you've popped, some kind of score. Anything of that nature, you have to keep some kind of secondary data. Make sense?
Good.
Continue to use good HTML structure by creating a header and footer around your main content. The header or footer must contain your name and copyright notice. For 2025, the page should be titled and appear neat and clean. Good. So, you may use Bootstrap 5 or multimedia elements, including CSS animations, to make your project visually appealing and interesting. You may not use jQuery. I'm not particularly even sure why, but you may not use jQuery for this. In the last class, somebody asked me, like, well, why? Why not jQuery? And that launched me into like a 20-minute discussion of like jQuery and what it is and why people don't like it anymore and, you know, all that stuff. I can give you like the rough view of that. You guys want to know why people hate jQuery?
Sure.
Yeah. So it's basically just because it's old. And like you may have noticed this, but like programmers in particular, like they really love any programming language that's new, and they hate everything that's old. Old being defined as having been around for more than 5 years. 5 years definitely. Although in fact, many of the things that are currently popular have been around for longer than 5 years, but they just didn't gain popularity until recently, right? Node is a good example. I think Node, the Node project, Node.js, was started in like 2010 or something like that. But anyway, so jQuery, right? The big selling point of jQuery, back when it sort of originally became popular, was that it integrated CSS-style queries into JavaScript, so that you could do, like, you could leverage that mechanism, which you all know from CSS anyways, to do stuff in JavaScript. The other thing that it did is it had a much more compact notation for doing things. So for example, if I wanted to do a jQuery statement to modify the text of a paragraph to have some value, or maybe even the text of all paragraphs to have some value, this is how it looks in jQuery. Ooh, yeah. I think that marker, I didn't even do anything like extraordinary to that marker, it's just run out. These things, man, they don't last. I'd prefer chalk, to be honest with you. So the $sign is kind of like the jQuery operator, like this is now a jQuery. P for paragraph dot text is hello world. And that is a jQuery statement that changes the text of all paragraphs to hello world, which is quite a bit more compact than in vanilla JavaScript, right? So basically, you can see, like, that's appealing, right? That's more compact. It was doing something that was difficult before. That's why jQuery became popular. The one thing about jQuery, though, is that you, like the typical way that it's done is you go out to the jQuery website, download the latest jQuery script, include that in your folder, and then call it, reference it the same way you would one of your own scripts. Not easy to get updates promulgated that way, you know? Bootstrap and the CDN, like, it has security issues, but at least you're always getting the current version, right? So that's kind of like gross. People don't like having to go out and download things and include them, right? It's a little bit gross, or at least at the very, like, at the time jQuery came out, it would have been, you know, the regular way of doing something, but, you know, tastes have moved on, shall we say. the internet has become a bit more reliable in the last 20 years as well. That's a thing that's easy to forget, is like back in the early days of the internet, like connections were dropped a lot more than they are now, you know? But anyway, so like things like CDNs wouldn't have made sense in the 90s, right? But anyway, so basically what happened, people saw jQuery, like the JavaScript people saw jQuery, and they said to themselves, wow, those are some really good ideas. We should put those in JavaScript. And then they did. This is where query select and query select all came from, right? Basically, they took these ideas out of jQuery and integrated them into vanilla JavaScript, or probably even ECMAScript. You guys know what ECMAScript is? Okay. So, different discussion. I'll tell you what ECMAScript is after I finish about jQuery. So, basically, over a process of some years and some number of versions of JavaScript, JavaScript gradually ate jQuery's lunch, right? Anything that was interesting, unique, or useful that jQuery was doing was integrated into vanilla JavaScript. Therefore, jQuery is really only like compact notation now. And that's not a good enough reason to import the library anymore, right? At least that's the common view. As developers, if you are maintaining any legacy code, which is probably a thing you're going to be doing in your careers, right? You will very likely run across jQuery. So I don't even necessarily agree that it's something that we should like not tell you about or teach you, you know? Because it's very likely in your actual career you're going to run across jQuery, and it's useful to know how it's structured at least, right? That being said, you know, Bootstrap a couple of years ago famously restructured itself to eliminate any dependency on jQuery. So, you know, people are kind of moving away from jQuery at the moment, but it's still like, programming languages never die, you know? Once you have an established code base using a framework or a language, it will exist forever. Literally forever. You know, people still program in COBOL. But, yeah. So, okay. So that's jQuery. Any questions about jQuery? Okay. Steve doesn't like jQuery, and that's why that's the reason he's being so draconian about it in this assignment that he wrote. ECMAScript. Does anybody know what ECMAScript is? Anybody heard the term before? Okay. So, back in the 90s, all right, you had different browsers that all had different versions of JavaScript, right? These browsers were actually in competition with each other for who had the best implementation of JavaScript. And like that's the browser that would be the preferred browser. But this was not a great, like this was a kind of an awful time to be a developer of JavaScript because there was no standard for JavaScript. So a program you wrote for, you know, Internet Explorer might not work in Firefox, might not work in Safari, might not work in Opera, right? Over time, people were like, oh, JavaScript seems to be doing more and more, and it's not just for making blinky lights on a web page anymore. Maybe we should standardize it. So, a great big group of very wise people who know what they're talking about sat in a room together and said, okay, what are the parts of JavaScript which everybody should be compliant with? that became ECMAScript. So ECMAScript is the standard to which all JavaScript implementations are held. ECMAScript itself is in a process of development. They add new things to ECMAScript occasionally. When they add it to ECMAScript, it's normally because individual browser JavaScript engines have all agreed that this is important, so it gets thrown into ECMAScript so that it's part of the thing you have to do to be compliant, right? The current best state-of-the-art JavaScript engine is the V8 engine made by Google. I don't know, maybe it's V9 now, but I think it's still V8. You could look it up, but I'm not going to. Does that make sense? You guys know what ECMAScript is now? Kinda? Okay. Good. Yes. All right. I'm going to continue with this document then. Although there's really not much to say that's left. Miscellaneous requirements. The app must run from beginning to end with no bugs or errors in the console. Your program must be bug-free. Yeah, sure. It's never really a matter of being bug-free. It's just a matter of how much time are you willing to spend looking for them. All programs have bugs. All JavaScript and CSS must be in separate external files. So I sent out an announcement yesterday. The tune of that is basically, I'm not expecting you to dynamically scale your SVG graphic depending on responsive design. It's actually a fairly difficult thing to do. And I think it's beyond the scope of what we're doing here. So I have lifted that requirement from the assignment. You do not have to worry about responsive design. Okay? Just, and honestly, the monitor that I'm going to be grading these things on is probably bigger than yours, so you probably don't even have to worry, but you're probably going to be, well, maybe you can make one that's bigger than that, but if so, I'll just use Zoom. You don't really have to worry about making it too big. You don't really have to worry about the dimensions of the SVG itself very much. So just go nuts, be creative. Don't worry about trying to squeeze it onto a phone, okay? Okay, sound good? All right. Use the documentation guide, etc. Hand it in the usual manner. This is one where there's probably going to be some, there's a much greater chance of having multimedia files attached to this one, like pictures and maybe even music or something, sound effects, who knows. Maybe you want to do sound effects, that would be very cool. But don't submit them on Canvas, just put them on CS Unix. That will be good enough. Canvas is really just for your source code. Okay? Sound good? Any questions about assignment 4?
So the SVGs that we use, we have to make them ourselves, or can we take a template SVGs?
So for particular SVG objects, I'm generally okay, for example, if you wanted to lift an SVG of a gear or something, it's gonna be it's probably gonna be if it's sufficiently complicated, I'm gonna be oh yeah, they got that from somewhere, that's okay. 'Cause it's generally okay for you to import a bitmap, right? Or people don't really call them bitmaps anymore. You can import a raster image file and not get dinged for plagiarism? Why would it be that you couldn't import a vector image file and get dinged for plagiarism? It doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, basically my line on like SVG objects that you may or may not find on the internet is like, I don't really see it as being that different from importing a PNG file from Google image search, so go nuts. Make sense? I think that's a common sense kind of approach to that. Any other questions? Okay. So, shall we do some lesson then now, since we've gone through that? Please direct all questions to your professor or to the discussion groups on the LMS. Well, you guys have been doing this for a bit now. You know what to ask me and what to ask your friends. Just don't share your code, okay? In particular, don't put your code up on Discord, okay? In particular, don't put your code up on Discord in Discord servers where you don't personally know all of the people in the server, okay? If you're going to show your friends code, do it with your trustworthy friends who aren't going to steal your code, okay? As I occasionally tell people during plagiarism meetings, it's not your job to get your dumb friends through college, okay? So let's remind ourselves where we left off. I believe we had done creating and destroying objects in a plain HTML context. Is that right? Does anybody remember that? Yeah? Okay. But if I remember correctly, we hadn't done it in an SVG context. Is that correct? So let's start there. Oh look, it's Pi Day. So please open up the code editor of your choice. Just I'm momentarily curious. When I say open up the code editor of your choice, how many people are using VS Code? How many people are using Notepad++? How many people are using something else? That's interesting. Like I use Notepad++ because VS Code often crashes because it's being run through Mohawk apps, and like that just like I know what the problem is, right? At some point, like it loses the connection because like it doesn't expect perhaps a continuous connection of like over 2 hours to ever actually happen. But when it does that, like I don't know if you knew this about Mohawk apps, but like if you lose internet, save your damn work, because that program might be closing in as little as 30 seconds. It requires an always-on internet connection to use. So Notepad++ is a little less persnickety. And there's really no reason it couldn't be installed locally, to be honest. It's, does anybody have Karen Lorne for Java? No? Well, she's the course owner for Java, and right now she's on the warpath to get IntelliJ installed locally, because, you know, there's no reason it couldn't be, you know, except for you know, IT not wanting to deal with it, basically, because IT manages the images for the lab computers. Oh man, I've been having some IT myself this week. Oh man, okay, I have to tell you the story, right?
Did they get downsized?
Hey?
Did the IT get downsized too?
They did actually. I don't know like how much of a hit they took, but they took some kind of hit. So if I were cynical, I would say, well, I mean, they didn't really do anything anyways, but so all right, let me tell you about my desktop computer at my workstation in Q-Wing, right? It's a desktop. It's about a little less than 2 years old. I come to it Monday morning, right? I try to fire it up. Doesn't fire up. I'm getting a blinking error code on my power button, right? So, being a person who knows a little bit about computers, I look up the error code. It's like, oh, RAM is connected but bad somehow. So I open up the computer and I take a look at the RAM, and it's not smoking, so that's a good thing. But you know, I pull it out, I swap. I got 2 RAM chips in that thing, both 8 gigs. You know, I try moving the one from slot 2 to slot 1, and oh, the computer boots. You know, because like I was a bit of a predicament. I couldn't even get into the BIOS, right? Computers need at least some RAM, right? Even to get into BIOS. So I stick this RAM stick in from slot 2 into slot 1, computer fires up, but you know, it is slow, because it now has half the memory that I'm used to, right? My subjective impression of the computer is that it's now slow, and doesn't boot as well as I'd like it to. Not to mention, like, I use that thing for, like, running virtual machines and that type of thing, so, like, I do actually need some RAM, you know? 8 gigs just doesn't cut it anymore, in my opinion. But, you know, so I contact IT because the machine is administered by IT. And I say, hey, I had a RAM chip blow. Could I get a replacement? It's okay. You just leave the replacement on my desk. I don't even need, you know, we can do this fast. You just give me the chip. I'll put it in. It's no trouble. It's like I get the email back, it's like, we need your computer. We need it physically. Please bring it to us. And it's like, excuse me, you are IT, I am the professor, you come and get my computer, thank you very much. Which is a thing I was told to say by the other professors, because you don't want to set that precedent, right? So they come, they get my computer, right? And I'm like, be nice to her. And they get her into the shop, and they're like, oh, we don't actually have the RAM that you need. It's like, you don't have it. It's just an 8 gig stick of DDR5 for a desktop. You don't have it? You're an IT department. Anyway, you repair computers professionally, and you don't have any RAM that would, okay, fine. They have to send it to the Dell tech. Yeah, the Dell tech has to see the computer. So, the Dell tech acquires the computer. And it's like, oh yes, needs new RAM. And a new motherboard. And I'm like, it needs a new motherboard? Why on earth would it need a new motherboard? It's just a RAM chip that blew. It's like, the slot was damaged. I'm like, and I know what that is, right? That's like them saying to me, oh, you damaged the slot when you were messing around with the RAM. You're not competent to slot one thing in and another thing out. It's like, yeah, okay. And so I write back, it's like, oh, I am certainly not sure how that could have happened. But you guys are the professionals. If it needs a new motherboard, it needs a new motherboard. You know, good gravy.
Okay.
So in a completely unrelated story, I live in a house on a corner and there's a sign on the corner, right? It's one of those stripy signs that says don't run your car into a fire hydrant, basically. And one time I saw a city worker come with his truck full of signs. And he got out of his truck, he looked at the sign, he unbolted the sign, he took the sign, stepped on the corner of it and pulled it up, threw it in the back of his truck, got a new sign out, bolted it on. And I think that story is completely unrelated to the story that I just told. So, shall we do some programming then? Let's do the SVG as typical. There we go.
Sir?
Yes?
Can you zoom in?
Have I done something wrong? What have I done?
No, it's just, can you zoom?
Oh, yeah.
For future,
There we go.
Leave it blank.
There we go. That helps me too because of my old man eyes.
Almost legally blind.
So anyway, long story short, I'm now keeping a, you know how like in prison people like scratch numbers in the walls? I'm doing that to see how long it takes them to get my computer back over just one new stick of RAM. See how long it takes them.
How long is it?
This happened Monday, so they're already up to 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know, this all could have been avoided if when I had gone to Canada Computers, they had just an 8 gig stick that wasn't actually two 16 gig sticks that were had the stupid gamer plastic casing on them, and they wanted $130 for them. It's just give me RAM. It's I go to the Staples, it's have you tried Canada Computers? Yes, I tried Canada Computers, you idiots. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't already tried Canada Computers. You are the secondary store. Ugh.
So is your computer basically like one of these boxes, or?
No, it's actually, at the time when it was bought, it was I teach courses that teach Unity, alright, which is the game engine, so it's oh, I need a computer with a graphics card, please, because I teach gaming.
So it's a tower?
It's a tower, yeah. I actually called it Clark, because it looks a little bit like the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Yeah, and I kind of sneakily snuck my own hard disk in there, and I configured it for dual boot to Linux. I don't even use the Windows partition. Yeah, so that's something I definitely took out before I handed it over to Dell. Just let me just have my hard drive, thank you. All right, there you go. Listen, it's their fault because they gave me a computer with an unlocked bootloader. If they give me a computer with an unlocked bootloader, that is my computer. That's what I say. Let's say width 500 pixels, height 500 pixels. There we go. Display, block, and margin auto. There we go. Let's import ourselves a little script. My script dot JS script. I have a terrible fear that my computer is going to come back to me with a lock on the back, you know? It's okay, I know a guy who picks locks. Yeah, but if you YouTube something like that and then do it yourself, you don't get the joy of patronizing one of your friends in their hobby, so, yeah. Oh, where was this even saved? Was this even saved? We should save the file. That's a good thing. Saving files, it's a good thing. Nick Moore, 2025. There we go. So, so the thing we need to do, let's set something up so that when we click, or, you know, I think clicking is fine. Clicking is, you know, pretty basic. When we click, we spawn something in to the SVG frame, right? So, in order to do that, we are going to have to attach an event listener to the SVG object. Document dot add event. Oh, not document. Wait. Document. I was almost right. Dot query selector. SVG dot add event listener. Click function. There we go. By the way, I believe the jQuery that does this would be something like svg dot click function, like that. I think it's something like that, which is significantly more compact. But I don't know. Like, does code compactness really matter that much in an age with autocomplete for function names? You know, if you're using an editor that does that, you know. But yeah. So we've already made a grave error. What's document.querySelector SVG going to do in this context?
Well, the script is loading before the SVG, so it will pick up null if you don't run the
Precisely so. This is going to pick up null because the SVG object hasn't been loaded yet. So, window dot add event listener load. There we go. Function. That's an embarrassing spelling mistake. There we go, there we go. Ta-ra! So now, when we click on the SVG, we wish to dynamically create a new object. Let's just make it a circle, okay? So, recall the 3 steps required in JavaScript to add a new element to a web page from nothing. Step 1, create or instantiate the object. Step 2, modify its properties. Step 3, bind it to the parent object. So I believe when you do, if my memory is serving correctly, if you're doing this in JavaFX, it actually looks like this. Like you do the add children line immediately after you've instantiated the objects, and then you modify their properties. That's probably, you can probably do it the other way around actually. But in here, this is the way you do it. You do it in this order. Okay? So, the line which instantiates a new object. Previously, we used document.createElement. This works for HTML elements only. It does not work for SVG elements. The reason for this is that browsers generally do not load the definitions of SVG objects by default, right? They just, it's a rare enough thing that they just don't add it to the prelude, right? So we need a slight variant on this, which basically creates the element, but also looks up the reference for how the elephant should be created. And this is how you do it. You use create element and s. We are now looking at a function, a method, taking two arguments. The first argument is the URL where the definition is being held. This is going to perform a web request. And the second is the type of element that we are creating. I'm not expecting anyone to memorize the URL. I do not expect myself to memorize the URL. It's in the notes. Well, at least there he is. Now, you may notice in this URL that the standard we're pulling from is about, a couple of years old. I think that some of the source code in this course may have been kicking around for quite some time. When I have time to do with this course as I wish, I'm probably going to remove this unit on SVG graphics and replace it with TypeScript. So, yeah. Also, I'm gonna see if I can force the Bootstrap stuff back into HTML and CSS where it belongs. That should liberate enough space to give at least an introductory treatment of TypeScript. You guys know what TypeScript is? Okay. All right. I will answer this question by showing you the 2024 Stack Overflow Developer Survey. So this survey is a survey of people who answer questions on Stack Overflow, who are very good at what they do, right? I use these statistics to justify changes like changing server side from PHP to Node to other professors. This is very high quality data, right? You can even say, among professional developers, among people learning to code, among other coders, what are the popular languages? So among professional developers, I would just like to point out, these are the most popular programming languages as of last year. Number 1 is JavaScript. Number 2, SQL, which is great because SQL is actually pretty easy. Number 3, HTML and CSS. You might not say that once you get into third semester and have to take the databasing course, but you know. Relative to JS, it's easy. Python is like your next, that's the first general purpose programming language on the list, right? TS is TypeScript. TypeScript is the 5th most popular language. By the way, Bash is also something you should all be learning. All right? Bash, Java, C#, C++, PHP. By the way, C# does not differ that significantly from Java. It's just Microsoft Java, largely. There are a couple of differences, but generally speaking, C# is Microsoft Java. So TypeScript. TypeScript is a language that is JavaScript with types. So it takes JavaScript, introduces a type system more similar to what you would see in Java. TypeScript compiles to JavaScript. So you write your program in TypeScript, you compile it, that compiler, it's not technically a compiler, it's like a cross-compiler or, a translator. You translate to JavaScript, you then take that JavaScript, throw it into your web application the way you would do any other JavaScript. And by so doing, right, basically this thing will give you all of the compiler errors that are lacking here. So there are much better, you can make much better assurances of correctness in TypeScript than you can in JavaScript. TypeScript is an attempt to fix all of the problems in JavaScript. So, yes. A thing which is becoming reasonably popular is even starting in TypeScript and coding up a Node.js application and then translating that into JavaScript and running it as a Node server, right? So, yeah, TypeScript is a thing. There's a, it is currently in the program, I believe in the upper level course, Emerging Web Technologies, which, by the way, if you're not taking Emerging Web Technologies, you are not intending to get a job as a web developer, right? That is a course that I don't think should be an option course. I think that should be just a course you have to take, in my opinion. The guy who runs that course, Kevin Brown, is he's really good at what he does. I recommend his courses every time. Another course which I highly recommend for your, I think it's a 4th semester option, is a course called Tools and Development Practices or something like that. But that's where Git is hanging out, is in that course. So Git is also something that you absolutely have to know if you expect to be a programmer in the year 2025. So yeah, TypeScript. TypeScript! I would love to be doing this course in TypeScript. Because then I wouldn't have to say, all of these digressions I go on, but, and here's the way that JavaScript is bullshit today. I wouldn't have to do that anymore, Or at least I'd have to do it less frequently. But right now I've got my hands full doing the node conversion, so it'll be some time before I can turn my attention that far. But anyway, so here you go. That is the string. Copy of that line of code. Paste it up here. Take that, put that in as the first argument. That website is not interesting to visit, by the way, except perhaps to find out that there are actually newer versions of that software. But the newest one, I believe, is 2018, so it's not very frequently changing. Then you specify what type of element you want to create. Circle. In the same manner as before, the return value of this method call is an object. It is the new object that you are creating. So we need to bind that to a variable. If we're intelligent, we will do that in the local scope. Unless you need to do something a little fancier with it, like if you need to keep track of them, you want to like register this thing to an array that you're keeping in global scope so that you can like do updates on it and stuff, but that's okay. Circle. We must now modify properties of the circle. Circle. So, in the same way that we have to go to an exterior resource to find the definition, the SVG definition of a circle, JavaScript will also not bind the attributes to object fields, the way that it very conveniently does for HTML objects. There's no such thing as .style, there's no such thing, well, .style might still exist. There's no such thing as like .r for radius, the same way that you get .style for CSS styles. Fortunately, we have still been given all of the tools we need to modify the attributes. We have set attribute. Set attribute requires two arguments, the first being the attribute you wish to set, and the second, the value you are setting it with. So, circle set attribute CX. Let's say math.random times, I think we did 500 by 500, no? Yeah. Apply that to CY as well. Let's say radius is somewhere between 5 and 40. There we go. Circle dot set attribute fill. Someone give me a CSS color. Maroon. Very good. Love it. Circle dot. Is that all we need? I think that's all we need for now. We should test just that much then. So, step number 3. We need to bind this to the parent object. In order to bind it to the parent object, we need to know what the parent object is. We need a reference to it. Fortunately, in this case, it is that thing. Within the context of this function, we may refer to the selected element as this, using the keyword this. This dot append child circle. Now, shall we see if it works? Oh, this is the wrong one. That's from yesterday. Ta-da! Very good. Did you guys get that working?
What was the last part of it? The one about binding?
This dot append child circle. I hear those mice furiously clicking away, which means some people must have gotten it working. So we've done creation. Let's now do removal. So, at the moment, we have at our disposal, from previously, an extremely blunt instrument for removing children. That'd be a great out-of-context clip.
We should definitely let HR pass by while having this conversation.
Yes, definitely. So the blunt instrument that we have for removing children from existence is basically to take the inner HTML property of anything and just reset it to an empty string, right? That will destroy everything inside. But perhaps we want to be more selective about the children that we destroy. Perhaps we want to use a more precise instrument of death. In this case, we want a way to remove a child given a reference to a child, right? So, we want either the remove method or the remove child method. Depending on whether you have a reference to just the child or you have a reference to the child and the parent, right? Although if you have a reference to the child, you can always do that instead of a reference to the child and the parent, but, you know. It's okay, I'll show you both ways. So, let's make another event such that when you mouse over a circle, it destroys. The bubble pops, right? Circle dot add event listener, mouse over, function this dot remove. So, within the context of the add event listener attached to circle, the keyword this refers to the circle now, rather than the SVG object itself. This is good. But interestingly, this is only the case because I used an anonymous function here and not a lambda / arrow function. If arrow functions will not create a new local context for variables, they won't create a new binding for this. So if I were to do, as an alternative, if I were to do this, that would actually delete the SVG object entirely. So that bit where I was saying that, you know, basically arrow functions and doing it this way are equivalent in every way, well, you know, I was lying. They're very, very similar, but there are a couple of semantic differences between them. That's one of them. The lambda does not create a new context for variables, right? Does that make sense? Hopefully. All right. Any questions? Shall we try it out then? So, click, 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 click. Pop. Oh, uh-oh. It's debugging time. Debugging time, debugging time. Well, let's see if this thing is even activating. Console.log. Pop. Oh, interesting. Oh. Yeah, that would do it. What a dummy. So you can see that, like, even at this level, you're starting to do something that might even resemble, you know, a game or a solution to the assignment, right? Like, if you did a thing where you had an input that modified some property somewhere, and then you also kept track of the score of how many bubbles you popped, like, you're getting pretty close to a solution to assignment 4. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be complicated. The only thing that you would need after this is some form of animation, because this does not have any animation, right? Does that make sense? Cool. Yeah, I'll show you script. There you go. I'd also, before we break for our break, I'd also like to just point one thing out. Up to now, when we have been doing these add event listeners, right? It's been kind of like, well, I could just use the onClick. I could just use, like, you know, the onClick attribute. I could just use the onChange attribute. I've got bindings for this in HTML. Why do I need to do this in JavaScript using the long bloody thing? Well, my friends, you can't do it to objects that don't exist in the DOM, can you? Right? If it doesn't initially exist in the HTML file, then you can't bind it using an HTML attribute, right? So, we have passed beyond the realm where you can just use the onClick attribute. All right? We are no longer in the shallow waters. We are now getting into the deep end. All right? Any questions? All right. Well, I am going to, at this point, declare our 15-minute break. Please be prepared for the resumption of class at 11:46 a.m. Thank you very much. More trouble than it's worth. More trouble than it's worth. My kind of view is like, I'm already getting paid enough by the college, and it's probably like more work to like work as a YouTuber than to do this work, so I'm just gonna be here.
Do you have like ads on your videos?
Yeah, I do, actually. They run ads on my videos anyway, so I might as well get some of the money, right?
True.
I make like no money. I think since I started my channel, I've made like $200.
Woo.
But you know, it's $200, but you know,
That's lunch.
yeah.
We'll start somewhere. I don't
Yeah.
want to get this in.
Yeah, like the ads on the YouTube videos pull like between like 2 cents and 20 cents on a typical day.
I'll subscribe
You
right
know?
now.
Oh, thank you, man. Like and subscribe, please.
Punch that like button.
You want to actually punch it into space.
Just for that wisdom of welfare.
Yeah. So, where were we? Ah, yes. So, would you like to see how you might be able to do animation then?
Yeah.
Cool. So, the example that I did in yesterday's class was we had a little object that followed the mouse pointer around at a lag. You guys wanna do that one? Or we could do something else if you want, like I'm easy. Anybody got any ideas of an animation they'd like to see? We got an hour. We could probably do something pretty cool. You know, pretty cool, pretty interesting. No?
Would we be able to make the circles that we create like chase after the mouse?
Ooh. Oh. Okay. That's what we're doing. All right. All right. Like zombies and stuff. Ooh.
Zombies.
Oh man, you could take this And like, if you gave the pointer the ability to fire bullets and kill them like they were aliens, that would be like, that'd be like your typical kind of, what's that game that's been popular recently? Vampire Survivors?
Ooh,
Yeah. That game's pretty easy too. Like, that would be a pretty easy implementation as well. Yeah. No. I'm not doing 3D. If you want 3D, you're doing it yourself. Although, because it's vector graphics, like, you could model triangles and project them to produce the 2D. Like, it's not impossible, right? Kind of similar to Tempest, right? But we'll do the bubble chasing thing. Okay. Bubbles chasing you. Okay. All right. Number one. We are going to require an update cycle, right? We're going to have to create a set interval that updates the positions of things at a fixed frequency. 16 milliseconds, 16.666666667 milliseconds. That gives you approximately 60 frames per second. So that's the one I recommend. The browser can handle it, as long as as long as you're remembering to destroy objects and you're not just accumulating infinite objects, it'll be able to handle it. So, to update all of these dudes, to update all of these circles, it is convenient to keep them in a data structure, right? We should have some place where we keep all of the references to all of the circles that exist, right? So, let's create that first. First things first, let's get a list of all of our circles going, all right? I don't know, are these enemies now? Are we thinking of these as being enemies?
Yes.
Okay.
Just point to you.
Baddies. There we go. Or, what do they call them in Sonic? They call them badniks. There you go.
Bad name.
Yeah. That's funny because my name is also Nick. So, when we create a new circle, we want that circle to add itself to that registry, right? So, you should do this like around the time that you're also binding it to the parent, right? These are similar operations. So badniks dot push circle. You guys know what a push operation means? Okay. Time for a lesson in elementary data structures. So, push basically means append. Pop means unappend. So, essentially, push and pop, the terms derive from a very basic type of data structure called a stack. You guys have heard of stacks before? Yeah. So basically a stack is an array where, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you push something onto the stack, you put a new thing onto the stack. 6. When you pop from the stack, you take the thing that was most recently put onto the stack and remove it. And that's how a stack works. Stacks are extremely useful and important. It's simple, but it runs a lot of your basic operating system stuff, like the function call stack, right? So the best kind of visual metaphor for stacks, right? How many people have a kitchen or some place where they keep food and dishes, right? In your kitchen, you have a stack of plates, right? You have a bunch of plates in your cupboard. Here's a question. How many of those plates do you actually functionally use? Probably only like the top 4 or 5, depends on how frequently you do the dishes, right? So,
Sure.
because the procedure, you take the plate off the top of the stack, you eat with it, you wash it, you put it back onto the top of the stack. So functionally, you're only really using the first couple of plates on the stack. You're not really using the rest of the stack, right? The computer stack is very similar to that. So there you go, that's what a stack is. They don't get much more complicated than that, actually. So, when we push a circle onto the list of badniks, basically it's an append operation, right? Good. So, we should test that. There you go. This is a list of references to all of our circles. Very good. So far, so good. Now the next thing that we want to do in order to have all of the circles chase the mouse pointer, we want to have always in memory the last known location of the mouse pointer, right? So, let's create a couple more variables. Let target x equal 0. Let target y equal 0. We need some way of updating target x and target y. There's this handy event listener, which you can attach, called mouse move. Now, mouse move activates anytime the mouse pointer changes its position while over top of an object. It's kind of like a hover, but it's a hover that doesn't always activate unless the mouse is moving. Does that make sense? So it'll work for our purposes since we're only registering the last known point anyways, right? So, document dot query selector svg dot add event listener. I'm in a good mood because I got my assignment 2 marked this week. I'm sure you all appreciate it too. There we go. Mouse move function. There we go. So what we want to do, if you recall, the function is passed an argument, which we are naming e, which contains a bunch of data about the mouse event. 2 of those things are client X and client Y, which are the positions of the cursors inside of the client. Ooh, but I'm going to have to disable this. Last time when I did this, I couldn't figure out how to do the offset with the SVG, so I'm just, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to kind of staple it to the top left corner, and we'll ignore that for the time being. Yes. So, target x is equal to e dot client x. Target y is equal to e dot client y. There we go. Now, just to make sure that's working, let's console log that. Nicely formatted. There we go. So, shall we see if this works? Am I going too fast?
Yes.
I will give you 15 seconds to catch up.
Easy. It's okay. I'll take it. I don't want you. Rude. Wisconsin. Are you serious? He's serious. Oh, he is serious. Oh my God.
Yes.
Good thing I got it already. What?
There we go. Let's test to see if it works. There we go. And as you can see, yeah, that is working. Very good. So, going back to our code, we now have a target X and a target Y reliably being produced, right? What we now need to do is we need to introduce the update cycle, right? So we don't have to do that inside of window add event listener, but we can. Set interval function. I said 16.6667. There we go. That's actually more digits than the computer can actually hold, if you're interested. Sometime ask me to explain to you why you should never, ever use exact equality comparison on floating point numbers, because it's kind of an interesting side discussion, but not right now. Maybe when we're done. Remind me to tell you why floats can be terrible, okay? So, what we want to do inside of set interval is we want to do something to every badnik, right? So we can take badniks, dot, for each, I'm going to want a function there we go. That's how you break the individual elements of the array out into a for each loop in JavaScript. It's ugly. It's ugly as sin. But then again, this is JavaScript, so. The fact that you don't have object constructors, and yet you still require the ability to add objects, construct objects, is also ugly as sin in JavaScript. So, badniks.forEach function taking badnik. This is where we update these guys with the new positions, right? Now, there are a couple of I'm just gonna say up front, we're gonna have to play with the offsets. Like, no matter how well you do the math initially on something like this, you're always gonna have to go back in and like perform some minor adjustments to make it look good. That's just how this kind of stuff goes. But basically, we've got two options here, right? Option number one involves taking an average. Option number two involves Pythagorean theorem, right? Little bit of math. So, and basically, the question is, do you want the speed of the object to be proportional to its distance to the target, or do you want it to move at a fixed speed? If you want to go for like the Vampire Survivors type model, the game objects in that game move at a fixed speed, right? It's somewhat easier to configure, I guess, and it makes a little bit more intuitive sense if you're like just changing properties of an object, right? To have like a base speed. The way that I did the mouse pointer follow example, which the code is posted from yesterday, that one uses a proportional. Basically, the thing that's following the cursor halves the distance between itself and the target every frame. So it kind of zooms around. It's, you know, well, I mean, I can even just show you what the behavior looks like, because I still have it on this computer. It looks like this, right? Halves the distance between itself and the target every frame. So it kind of like, it follows pretty closely, but at a lag, right? But if you want something kind of clear, you know, creepily and suspensefully creeping towards you over time, like a zombie, you probably want the first option. And frankly, I think I'm going to do that because I did the other one this time, and the code is posted. So I'm going to do the one that involves Pythagorean theorem. Okie dokie. Sound good? All right. So, it involves just a little smidge of trigonometry. Hopefully that's not too far to go. So, all right. You guys ready for some math? Do you guys do trigonometry? Have you guys done? Hopefully you guys have done trigonometry. All right. All right. So, thank you. So, all right. So here's the math problem. Right? Here's the math problem. That's the math marker. All right. Let's say you have your position, all right? Let's call this current x, current y, right? We know these coordinates. We have a position up here, target x, target y. So far, so good. What we want is we want along a line segment intersecting both of these points, we want to calculate a new position here given a magnitude m. That's the math problem. You with me so far? This position is the position of this object in the next frame, right? If we want to make it so that the object closes the same distance each frame, this is how you would do it. It's actually easier mathematically to just kind of calculate a point in the middle of this. That's what the previous example does. All you do is you take x here, x there, sum them, divide by 2. It's just an average, right? Easy to calculate. This one's a little harder mathematically, so that's what we're going to do. All right? Maybe just for the sake of making the diagram readable for people in the back, I'll say that our magnitude is somewhat larger. There we go. Look good? All right, so we need to know nx and ny. We'll call that new x and new y. That's what we need to calculate. All right? So, this is what we do. First, we construct a larger triangle, right angle triangle, using these 2 points as our reference points. This is a triangle, right? We want this here is a smaller triangle. What do these two triangles have in common? This line, yes. This line, yes.
The angles are the same.
The angles are the same, that's right. This angle, theta, is the same in both cases, right? So we need to calculate theta to be able to calculate this guy, right? Now, who remembers their basic trig identities?
I think it was a squared plus b squared was c squared.
That is the Pythagorean theorem. That is not trig identities. Anybody remember SOHCAHTOA?
So yeah.
There we go. So we have sine, cosine, and tangent. Right? So, what does so mean?
Opposite over the hypotenuse.
Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. That's the hypotenuse. Cos theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tan theta is SOHCAHTOA.
Opposite over
That's right, opposite over adjacent. Right? So, you've got a couple of different ways of calculating this, but we can calculate the distance here reasonably easily. It's cx minus tx. Right? The current position minus the target. The difference between the coordinates is this is O, this is A, right? So, to derive a formula for theta, tan theta is equal to opposite cy minus ty over adjacent cx minus tx. To derive a formula for theta, we take the inverse tangent of that, cy minus ty over cx minus tx. That is something we can calculate in JavaScript. The math library contains definitions for all of your trig identities as well as their inverses. However, the naming is a little bit strange. They call them arctan. Arcsine, arctan, arccosine. Like arctan, like that, is inverse tangent. Does that make sense? So, using that, we now know theta. Alright? Theta, check. It's also a terrible marker. Just write that down. I'm actually a little mad at the markers because usually something happens to them and they break. It's like rare for me to actually just kind of use up one, so I'm a little mad. They don't last that long, actually. These things are expensive too. Good grief. A single stick of chalk costs like 5 to 10 cents, you know? Anyway. So the question then becomes, how do we derive equations for nx and ny? Right? Using pretty much the same mechanism, right? So, if this is A prime and that is O prime, right? Then A prime will be equal to Cx minus Nx, right? O prime will be equal to Cx minus, or Cy minus Ny, right? So, we have an equation that uses both opposite and adjacent, but you don't want to mix two variables together in one equation, otherwise you can't solve for them, right? So at this point, we break out sine and cosine, right? So sine theta is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Now the hypotenuse is a known value. That is our magnitude, right? So our equation becomes sine of theta, which is known, equals opposite, which is Cy minus Ny, over the hypotenuse, which is the magnitude, which is roughly the speed of the character, the speed of the badnik. So in this case, you have to rearrange and solve for ny. Ny will be equal to m sine theta, or it would be, I always get the positives and negatives mixed up. It'd be cy over m? No, you put that there first. I'm trying to do too many steps at once. M sine theta is equal to cy minus ny. It's been a while since I've done algebra, actually. That's m sine theta minus cy equals negative ny. So ny is equal to cy minus m sine theta. If you write that equation and you get it, and it's doing strange things, just try swapping some of the positives and negatives. And swap positives and negatives until it does what you want it to, basically. Conversely, the equation that we would derive for, wait, did I say, yeah, sine. Using cosine as our base, cosine theta is equal to a over h, a being cx minus nx, a prime, pardon me. Pardon me, folks. Yeah, I didn't even write that one out. Okay. Over m is equal to cos theta. Move that guy over there. M cos theta is equal to cx minus nx. You arrive at a very similar position, cx minus m cos theta. Equations. Now, I know that was a lot of math. These equations are what we need to calculate in JavaScript. And we can write mathematical formulae in JavaScript to do those. Okie dokie? Let's do it. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're fine. We're fine. Whoop. I know I'm covering up the math. So, first thing that we need to calculate is theta. Math dot arctan? Oh, you're not auto-completing, that makes me worried. Alright. Let me just look up what JavaScript does. ATAN, okay. It's not arctan, it's ATAN, but the A stands for arc. So, ATAN. There we go. And then we put a fairly lengthy expression in here, one thing divided by another. cy minus ty over cx minus tx. cy, which c in this case, we need to read that first. Minus target y over current x minus target x. There we go. Now, we currently don't have current values for x and y, which constitutes a problem, right? We need to read that from the object. So, I'm going to introduce you. We used set attribute previously. You could probably reasonably figure out how get attribute works, right? But here's your actual example of it, right? Badnik dot get attribute cx. Let current y equal that. Now, I just want to show you something, because this could cause you problems, all right? Because this is now math we're doing, right? Is this the one? Yeah. So let's take a look at our list of badniks, all right? Let's examine maybe the first one, all right? There we go. Dot get attribute cx. Now, 434.135, etc. What do you notice about this value? That be a string R. It be the stringiest string I've ever seen. What happens if you use an operation like plus on that? Concatenation. That's right. Everything stored in the DOM is stored as a string. If you want to do math on it, you must convert the type. Because this isn't bloody TypeScript. So, does anybody remember what function you used for that?
Numbers?
Yeah, does that work?
That's what I use for my code. Like I'll wrap it in like number, and then it'll try to turn it into.
I think the slides recommend like parse int and parse float, but probably it's equivalent. Parse float. Maybe number. Let's see. Yeah, number also works. Number would obviously do both ints and floats. You stink JavaScript. You have compound, integer, and floating types. So, okay. So we got all the data we need now. Now, we also have equations for new x and new y. Let new x equal, looking at it, it's current x. I know it says negative, but I kind of feel it should be positive, but. We need a speed. Let speed equal, I don't know, per frame, let's do 1. Yeah. Speed times math dot cosine of theta. There we go. And y will be current y minus speed times. Now, I should note parenthetically, this is more math than is required to complete the assignment successfully. Alright? You don't have to get into trig, you just have to have something animate. Right? But, trig. Trig is fun. Math is fun. So now that we've calculated our new x and our new y positions, the next thing to do, sorry, you have a question?
Are both parse floats supposed to be current y?
Nope. Thank you. Good catch, yeah. Now we want to assign these new positions to cx and cy. So, badnik dot set attribute cx new x, and Badnik set attribute cy new y. There we go. So, shall we see what that does? Oh. Oh, well, okay. So we have a problem. We have a math problem. When it's on this side, the objects are traveling in the opposite direction to the way that they're supposed to be. Right? So, we could do one of two things. Right? We could try to fix the equations, or we could clutch ourselves an awful solution. You guys want to do the awful solution? All right, let's do the awful solution. So, we notice that when our current x is less than our target x, everything goes the opposite way that it should, right? So, here's what we do. If current x is less than target x, we do something awful. Otherwise, we don't. If my math professors could see me now. I think we have to, actually we have to, not this bit, this bit. Let's see if that works. Nope. Really? Did I save that? That should have had some effect. Oh, that's kind of interesting though. Because I haven't really been playing with the pointer at all. So they're going away, going the opposite of the way that we want. Subtracting the speed should have done that. So I'm going to disable a couple of console messages. Just one actually. Console.log. Let's see, what do I need to know? It would be useful to know this bit. All right. Yeah. I would have expected this term to be negative, right? Well, this is interesting. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. While, okay. Unrelated bug. while we are deleting things now from the SVG, we're not actually deleting them from the list of badniks. So they're currently still having calculations performed over them, which is why I'm getting reports from dead cells, right? So let's just do that quickly. This is the code where the thing should be removed. So 2 operations. Number 1, we have to find ourselves in the list. Number 2, we have to remove ourselves from that position. All right? So the position in the list is found by badniks dot index of this. See? When I pop that one, I get a report of its position in the list, which is going very quickly. Oh my. Anyway, that works. So next we need to remove this element from the list. Unfortunately in JavaScript, the way that you do this is with splicing. There's a splice operator, which is basically a delete at this position for this many elements operator. Badniks the splice, starting at position index of this and going for 1 element. Now, if I create an element and I don't destroy it, you can see it's still there. Good grief. Right? If I create an element and destroy it, you know, I created 4 and I just destroyed 2, so, man, this is so annoying. All right, I'm turning that off. For the purposes of demonstration, there we go. If I create a bunch, destroy 3 of them, you can see that I only have 2 left. So it works. Yay! All right. Now, back to math problems. So, I click. I would have expected that to be negative, right? That should be negative, and it's not. Oh, I should report this one actually as well. So let's step this up 1 level. Yeah. Oh. Try that. Bum bum ba-dum boo. I forgot to delete those lines. Wow. All right. Oh, I think I knew what I was doing. Okay. Block level scoping. I was redeclaring new X and Y inside of the if statement, and it was scoped inside the if statement. I hate JavaScript so much. And there you go. Now it doesn't matter what side of the circle we're on, it works. Yes. Don't need the console statements anymore. So there you go. So the essential point of animation is that essentially you're using a set interval function. You're doing some kind of modification of something's visual properties at a specific interval of time. Like we're doing something like a little bit complicated and mathy here, but you don't, like for the assignment, you don't have to do something this mathematical, right? Although, if you want to do anything, you know, if you want to do something a little interesting and impressive, that's how you might do it. Make sense?
You said this was the ugly way of doing it?
Yeah, but it's also the only way I've ever like had that works of fixing that particular problem.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's like, basically, like the problem kind of comes down to, it's like, like if you take a look at like what inverse tan is supposed to look like out of here,
Sorry?
right?
Yeah.
This is the graph of inverse tan, right? At a certain point, the angles that it returns back are supposed to go negative, right? But like, they just don't seem to, you know? Like it should be negative, but it doesn't become negative somehow, so, you know, I don't know, maybe if I changed it to arctan 2, maybe that works. Because there's arctan 2 as well, which I saw, maybe this works. Save. Bumble, bumble, bumble. Not a number, huh? That's not doing what it thinks it, what I think it does. Yeah. So like I just kind of have to manually go in and you know, either add or subtract based on the position. Ooh, this is an interesting little case here actually. You notice how it's like not quite there? This is the difference between like client X and the like absolute, like relative X inside of the SVG. The distance there is about the same as this here, the padding, was that the margin difference. So if we went into like remove the margin there, but you know, basically the other thing that you would have to offset this by is the position of this point in the viewport to make client X work efficiently. That's why I attempted to staple the SVG to the top left corner in this manner. So, like, not impossible by a long shot, but, you know. Do we have time, actually? Not really, but let me see if I can get that. JavaScript, read position of, get position of element relative to window. Yeah. Get bounding client rect. Okay. Sounds a little violent, but okay. Yeah. So top and then left. So y would need to be offset by subtracting this value, I think. So y, new y minus top, new x minus left. See if that works. Let's see if that does anything. Ew. Hell not defined. Oh, okay. So that would be the SVG though. Document dot get query. Query selector. I hate JavaScript. I hate JavaScript. I hate JavaScript. I hate JavaScript. Woo!
Whoa.
Yeah!
You just make what you're possible. The colors. Yeah, 2 weeks later. Like the day there's a practice day.
8. Yes.
6 months.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm doing it at the wrong end. I should be modifying target by that amount every time it's assigned. Where is that? There it is. Also, who uses var, honestly? Let.
Yes.
Let. There we go. Client X plus left or minus left. Client Y minus top. And that's fixed the problem. There you go.
What was the problem?
So when you get e.clientX here, that's relative to the viewport, not to the SVG. So you have to offset by the position of the SVG to have the thing perfectly home in on the pointer, rather than home in on a point which is, you know, adjacent to the pointer and offset by the distance of the offset of the SVG. The effect is minimized here because I took the SVG and I rammed it into the top left corner. But, you know, with that modification, you would be able to put the SVG anywhere on the page and it would still work. Any questions? Comments, concerns? Philosophical questions?
So we use like a long floating point. If you just have written, let's say, 1,000 divided by 60. So like that's like 1,000 milliseconds divided by.
Yeah, you can. You can get it to calculate that itself. The question is like functionally, how much precision do you need there? A human being is probably not going to be able to tell the difference between 15, 16, or 17, let alone that many digits, right? Unfortunately, I ran out of time for my rant on floating point numbers, but all right. Thank you very much, folks. I will see you next week. Work hard. Yes.
What was it? Try hard.